Hello, and welcome to the Vintage Reel Service Guides. In this video, we'll take a quick look at reassembling a Pflueger Nobby model number 1963 baitcasting reel. This video is just intended to provide an overview of the process and moves. The Vintage Reel Service Guide site provides a step-by-step illustrated procedure for this service, along with guides for other mid-priced, mid-century American reels. This reel has already been cleaned and lubricated, but we'll add a little more oil and grease to the important points as we reassemble to show where those points are. Reassembly is mostly a process of reversing the disassembly procedure, but there are a few tricky bits, and we'll focus on those. So the first thing to do is replace the spool and the front plate. So we put a dot of oil in the pivot bearing and a little dot of reel grease on the click tongue. Now, take a look at the spool and make sure that the cog end goes in first. So just fit it into the pivot bearing like so. Now we can replace the front plate. Line up the little half moon cutouts in the front plate with those in the back plate, and line up the holes with the pillars and just slide it on. It just presses straight on. Now you'll need to hold the front plate while you put the shaft housing back in place. So the shaft housing just fits into those little half moon cutouts, and just line up the screw holes in the shaft housing with those in the back plate and replace those two tiny screws. And again, you'll be using a 3.5 centimeter screwdriver or something around that size. So just snug, they don't have to be too tight. Now we can replace the shaft. Give it a little bit of oil. Do not use grease on the shaft. Just oil it well. And then set it off to the side for a moment. And grab the line block assembly. And make sure that the line guide fits into that little groove in the pillar above it. Now you'll have to hold that in place while you put the shaft in, because for now it's just loose. Make sure the square end of the shaft is up, because that engages with the shaft pinion, and just push it on through the line block assembly. Like so. Make sure the shaft is seated in the other end. Looks good. Seems like it's in there good. And now you can replace the shaft pinion. So use a little bit of grease on the shaft pinion, just a little. Just a very light film is all it needs. And take an old paintbrush and brush it around on all the teeth and all the surfaces, front and back. Then just press that onto the end of the shaft and give it a few turns. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get it on there. And just make sure it's snug and fits all the way onto the shaft. Now we can replace the spool pinion. Once again, you just slip it on the end of the spool, press down and give it a few turns to make sure it's seated. It's got those two little square cutouts on the sides. And finally, we can replace the gear, the one and only real gear. So just press that onto the shaft. And you'll need to finesse these just a little bit to get all the teeth to fit together, since they're just loose right now. But make sure that the gear and both pinions mesh. And then add just a little bit of grease at the contact points. And again, just brush it in. This helps get off any excess grease and also, of course, spreads it around so all the teeth get greased. Now you can add just a little bit of oil to the outside of that shaft on the gear. And now we can replace the cap. So that just slips on. And make sure that it's snug all the way around where it fits up against the plate. Just press it on. And now we can replace those 3 very tiny screws. So give each screw hole just a little dot of oil. This will help with future disassembly. And go ahead and replace those. Once again, they don't have to be very tight, just snug. Don't make them too tight. Now we can replace the crank and handle assembly. So we just slide that onto the shaft and add the crank nut and use the 3/8 inch socket to tighten that down. Again, it doesn't have to be too tight. Now there's a very tiny hole in the middle of the crank nut, and that's used to lubricate the reel when it's assembled so that you don't have to disassemble it in the field to lubricate it. So this is just a little demo of how that works. And finally, we're replacing the pawl. That's a very tiny part. So it really helps to have a pair of tweezers. So grab the pawl, the teeth go down. They go down inside that opening in the guide block, and just press it in there. Slide the cover back in place and retighten that extremely tiny screw. Make sure the cover's on there straight and the screw's tight, but not too tight. And that should be just about it. Now we can do some functional testing. Bench test, we can test the level wind. When you turn the crank, the line block should go back and forth across the shaft very smoothly with no noise, no snags. Looks good. The clicker, when it's off and you turn the handle, you should hear very little or nothing. Should turn both ways easily. When you engage the clicker, you will, of course, hear the clicking that fishermen love so much, and it'll be a little bit harder to turn the crank. That helps to keep the line tight when you're not using the reel for fishing. Now the ABL control, the anti-backlash, if you turn it until it clicks, that's 0. And you can tell that when you spin the handles, with the clicker off, of course, the handles spin very freely. There's no resistance. No resistance on the spool. So give it a little turn, maybe a half turn or a full turn, and you'll start to notice a little bit more resistance. You see that's not as freewheeling as it was. Then give it another turn, and it's a little tighter. Another turn, and it's a little tighter yet. And finally, you get to that click, and it's once again at 0. So it only turns in one direction. That's about it. It's all reassembled. Everything's good. Grab a paper towel. Wipe off any excess grease and oil so that they're not gathering salt and grit out in the field. And we can call it finished and ready to fish.